I'm Laura Bonnell, and this is the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast coming to you from Detroit. Please subscribe and even rate and comment on our podcasts when it moves you. I learn something new with every podcast, and I'm always inspired by the people that are showcased here. We don't give medical advice. You need to connect with your doctor for that. I hope that this Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast educates you and sparks some volunteering or advocacy. The CF community needs people like you. Thanks to our sponsors, Viatris, Genentech, and Vertex for their support. You're going to love this podcast. It was so great to talk with Nick Kelly. I've wanted to have him on this podcast for a while now, so I am so glad that it happened. You're going to learn so much about him and his amazing mother, who I already love and have never met her. He was diagnosed when he was 3 months old, thanks to his mom. And he has so many accomplishments today. He's earned a bachelor's and a master's degree from Bowling Green State University. He's a dietitian. But that is not all. He's also an author, a dancer, a speaker. And once you start watching his videos that he has on his website, you won't be able to stop because you're going to be so inspired. Trust is something that you must start from within. And to trust externally, he talks about first trusting yourself. And he has so many beautiful little statements and thoughts that you're going to want to write down and maybe put on a Post-it note that you'll look at every day. He's also done TEDx talks and talking about healing through the human experience. He does motivational videos where he talks about fearing the truth. So many things, so many topics. You'll find something that reaches you, and you're going to hear so many inspiring things in this podcast. And everything that Nicholas talks about is not CF. It's just about life in general. And he talks about how CF played a part in his internal strength. So let's get to it and hear from him, because we just had a wonderful time talking about all things, including cystic fibrosis. Please do us a favor, and after you listen to this podcast, if you would rate it, subscribe, and leave a little note about how you felt this podcast touched you, that would be fantastic. Thanks so much. It is great to have you with us, Nick. I've wanted to talk to you for so long, and I'm really glad that we get this time to chat a bit. So welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
You do have a fabulous attitude. You're a 36-year-old person with cystic fibrosis. And what do you attribute your wonderful attitude to?
You know, there's a lot of things that have really helped shape my attitude, but I would be remiss if I didn't start with my family. The attitude I have is really sitting what we have is the Kelly mantra, just really being resilient and keep pushing, no excuses, no matter what.
I love that, because I think it really helps if you have that support from your family and you're not in a woe is me attitude. I think in general, life looks much better at all times. Is that what you're finding?
Absolutely. That woe is me attitude, or what I like to call the who's sicker game. When you start comparing why you're sick versus someone else is sick, or starting to compare those things, I tell people the only thing that wins in the who's sicker game is the disease or the struggle you're fighting. So for me, mentality is always been the biggest thing and always will be the biggest thing to overcoming and achieving.
And also, I think with unnecessary comparing, someone always has it worse. And I also think it's the way you look at CF that is so helpful. It's a learning tool. It's who you are, right? It's how you are impacting the world is in part based on the fact that you have cystic fibrosis.
Absolutely. For a long time, me and my CF had a very cankerous relationship, is the way I'll put it. And then it got to a point where I realized CF does not define who I am, but it has shaped who I've become. And I've allowed that shaping to help me thrive, help me build relationships, help me navigate trials and tribulations, help me have triumphs because of not just, everyone's going through something, someone's always going through something worse. That's true. But even that thinking still places the comparison to somebody else's struggle.
True.
For me, this is the situation I'm in, and I wonder how I can help or be a positive influence in someone else's situation versus thinking someone else has it worse than me. I'm thinking, how can I make someone else's better than what I'm currently in or equal to what I'm currently in?
Just because you're positive and you're grateful and all of that doesn't mean that you don't have struggles, right? I mean, you still have struggles, but in all the videos that you've done, I watch you and I'm so inspired by your words and your energy.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And that just comes from, I always try to be what I call a positive light in a little bit of darkness, especially when it comes to this disease. And yes, I still struggle to the point where in the last 5 months, I've been admitted to the hospital for 2.5 of them.
Wow.
I haven't been out the hospital 2 weeks prior to this interview. So I say that to say I had a 7-week stay and a 4.5-week stay. And so when I start looking at those struggles, I start looking at the amount of time I spend in the hospital, the amount of difficulty I have. It's there. It's very much real. As I say, I left CF in all its glory, but that's even more of a testament to how I choose to face the battles and how I choose to look at the battles I'm facing.
And, I was at a CF conference just yesterday, and I was speaking to a group of CF doctors and social workers, etc., everybody that's involved. And I said, if my girls had to have a disease, which of course they do, they both have cystic fibrosis, I'm glad that it's CF because this community is incredible. In spite of the hard times and the good times, I'm grateful for our community. Do you feel that?
So it's interesting. There's kind of two parts to that. When I was younger and even into my mid-20s, I would often ask people if they could get rid of their CF, would they? And the interesting thing is you think that would be easy? Of course I would. And I started to think about it and I was like, at the time I said no. Because of the community, because of all that CF has given me. If you asked me today, 10 years later, my answer would be absolutely, because I feel like I am who I am now. CF has shaped me to the point where I no longer need it in that sense. But yes, absolutely. The community is so strong and they're resilient and they're uplifting. I can't tell you how many CF friends I've had, and in reality, I've learned more from my CF friends about my disease than most clinicians have taught me.
Wow. I understand that. And that is wonderful. And you have a twin sister.
I do.
So tell me about the CF journey with your twin sister.
So because no one else in my family has cystic fibrosis. So that journey has always been interesting because my family didn't treat me any different. I wasn't allowed to be treated different. The only thing that would change is I would incorporate my medications, the different things I needed for my lifestyle into my daily or weekly, monthly routine. For example, growing up, when I had to do my PDs, we would turn into a game. Who could hit Nick the hardest? And my cousin Alan always won. I always say it's probably because he got the height, I got the looks, but he might beg to differ. So I just find that if we went on a hike, I'd have to go on the hike. The only difference is I would be allowed to stop. And so each one of these examples was one that I was allowed and required to do everything else my family did. I was just allowed to amend it, but not never do it.
I gotcha. As you're a dietitian, I wonder, I guess, kind of what you eat. Like when my girls were diagnosed 28 and 26 years ago, it was high-fat diet, let them eat sundae and ice cream. And we found in the beginning that seemed crazy to us. And, it was throw butter and everything. And as they've grown up into adulthood, they went vegetarian and vegan, and they're eating very healthy, and they find that that works for them. And I wondered what you think about diet with all your expertise, and what do you do?
So first, I always tell people I eat the way I eat, subset of my profession. So I have people will call me picky. I like to say I'm selective.
I like that.
I know what I like and I eat a lot of it. I'm the guy who could eat chicken and rice every day for lunch. I could eat a bowl of cereal every day for breakfast and for lunch. So I'm pretty simple in that regard. But I do try to be mindful of getting the things I need in. As for the overall health, recently, probably within 2 years ago, I started evaluating the CF diet. And I thought there was possibly a flaw in it. So I actually went vegan myself to test out the theory. I was vegan for about a year. And honestly, I'd probably still be vegan if tofu didn't make me incredibly sick. But what I was able to find is, one, I ate more fried or a lot of air fried food than I did on processed food than I ever did when I wasn't vegan. Because there's nothing fast when you're vegan. It's rice bowls or something you have to heat up. There's very few fast foods or quick foods, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big difference. But I do believe I've talked to other CF patients, and having that plant-based diet or having that maybe low fat kind of or healthier fat can take some of the load off of people's stomach, especially for people whose GI symptoms might be more severe than their lung symptoms. I believe it's very much a viable option. But I always caution people, we still need calories. So if we are in need of calories, you have to be mindful of being able to get them while still being able to get like the lifestyle you want to eat if you're vegetarian or vegan.
Absolutely. And we're not giving advice to people because they need to speak to their own dietitian and their team. But it is really good to have this conversation because I think it's more than just eat a high-fat diet.
Absolutely. And I'll put an asterisk out there. This also changes when you start talking about modulators, because that becomes a whole different conversation as well.
Right. Talk about that.
So modulators have been really fantastic for a lot of people. They've had so many benefits and so many advancements. However, just like anything, especially with our meds, there are side effects. One of the biggest side effects from a nutrition standpoint is what we now see as body weight images. So we see like body weight distortion of images and body weight image issues in the sense of, so a person might have been 105 pounds most of their adult life, and that would be 20 pounds under what they needed to. And then they start a modulator, and then next thing you know, they gain 15 pounds in a month and a half. Now, although that weight they gained was healthy, it still doesn't change who they're looking at in the mirror is now different. I tell anybody, if you wake up in a month, you lost or gained 15 pounds, you would notice and you would see yourself differently.
Right.
That's no different for a CF, or even if the weight was needed.
And it's so interesting. Weight for anyone, it's touchy. It depends, right? It changes your image of yourself and your confidence level and the way that in the world, how people identify what beauty is. So there is so much wrapped up in it, different for men, different for women, but it really is interesting. So what do you say to people? How do you help them through it? Just, even if it's just your CF friends that you're talking to.
I tell them be patient with themselves. I tell them to understand that it's very important that they understand that the weight is healthy, or this is a byproduct of your body working effectively. I try to really steer them towards the positives, but I'll be in full transparent honesty. I myself, we often don't think about men, but I myself suffer from body weight image issues. So we're not impervious to it. And I have to remind myself, this is part of disease, or, I never experienced like the CF gut or the bloating until recently. And so that's been really hard on me. I'm a person who really I work hard to value my stomach, my abs, and that kind of my physical physique. And seeing that is really hard, to be honest with you.
And really, as I've learned myself, it's really about feeling healthy and being a healthy weight and keeping in touch with your doctor and your dietitian, it seems to me.
It's an entire team effort to stay healthy, to feel good. That is really important that as a team, because I tell people, no matter how much your doctors love you, your dietitians love you, your NPs, your pharmacy tech, whoever it might be, your health lies in your hands. So you have to be the driving force. So you take the reins and then allow them to help you with what you need. Be vocal. Tell them this is what you need help with. This is the thing that I want to help with. This is the thing. And then allow that team support to rally around you in those efforts.
And are you able to be on a modulator?
So when people ask me that, I always like to tell them my status is I am modulator single. Okay. Still out here on the market, looking for something that fits me right.
That's interesting that you say that, because when my daughter tried the CF modulator and then had a reaction to it, she said that's a very touchy question. So I apologize for asking you, but I think in the context we were talking about, it was important to ask. But my daughter reminded me, I'm still living my life out here, even though I can't be on one. She has since retried and went on the latest modulator, but it reminded me that she's like, I'm still living my life. And when people ask me about the modulator, because everyone's so excited about it, she says, I find it depressing, because she was feeling so bad that everybody felt like she had to be on this modulator, but she was living the life the best she could because it didn't work for her. And now that she's on it, she's very sensitive to other people. And she actually has talked to physicians and tried to teach them how to talk to other people with CF who can't be on a modulator, or there isn't one yet because they're part of that 10 or 12% that doesn't have one for them.
So that's amazing. Shout out to your daughter for being able to talk to the clinicians and educate them. One of the hugest things is like there's a gap of communication between patient and clinician. So anything and anyone who can help bridge that gap, I just applaud. For me, I don't really find it a touchy subject, as I've always looked at the modulators as something that I'm super excited about, because even though I'm not on it, I don't have to watch my friends suffer. I've lost more people to this disease than I can count, or I would like to count. So I look at this as an opportunity for the people I care about not to suffer, for the people I care about to be able to thrive. I live life. Like I said, I'm sick and I have trials and tribulations, but I live life. I have the benefit of I work hard, so I don't particularly look sick, which is kind of a double-edged sword at times.
Right.
I travel. I have accomplished a lot of things I want to. I'm an author. I was a professional dancer, poet. I have all these things, dietitian, as mentioned, public speaker. So I have all these elements to my life that I am able to do. So I'm living. I'm making it happen. And having a modulator would be fantastic, of course. Anything that can lessen the symptoms is always great. But that could just as well be a new antibiotic, a new treatment therapy, whatever that might be. So for me, modulator is just one more tool that people are able to use. And some tools I'm able to use and some tools I'm not, regardless of modulator. So I look at it no different.
Beautifully said. And that's why I love watching all your videos and hearing. I like your perspective. I like the way you set things up. And I wonder, going back to your twin sister, how is that? Because both my daughters, Molly, who is healthier usually than Emily, there is some guilt on Molly's part because she's healthier. Like, does your sister have any guilt because she doesn't have CF and you do, and you're twins? Or is that just crazy and everything is fine?
Man, not even. She got guilt for nothing. Me and my twin are very different. And as we've gotten older, we've found a lot more similarities in ourselves. But no, if anything, Nicole growing up might have resented me a little bit because it looked like I had favoritism, and then we were able to navigate. And plus Nicole was my twin, so she's a minute younger than me. Never let her forget that.
Yeah.
But my older sister is several years, she's like 4 years older. So she had my cousin like in that same range. And then I had my cousin Alan, who I mentioned earlier. So she didn't have that like counterpart running mate. So sometimes she was an odd person out too. So that kind of was the dynamic growing up. So I would never say she felt guilty about having it and not having it. No, that was never a never thing.
Gotcha. You know, when I went on your website, I think it was your blog, I read the quote, bad things that you talked about: open heart surgery at 5 years old, emergency surgery at 20 years old, and code white and code blue. I don't even know what code white is, but can you kind of walk us through?
So I had open heart surgery when I was 5 years old. I had an ASD repair. I had countless endoscopy procedures. I had polyps when I was 16. And in between that, I have had very devastating losses in my life that have shaped my life at 17, and then again at 21, then again at 25, and then again at 29 or 30.
By losses, do you mean people?
Yeah, people who have passed away.
Okay.
My closest friend, Nick, passed away when I was 17. Then Kevin at 21. Then basically, well, like I said, my sister at 25. And then a piece of my heart at 30, Angie. So I've lost so many people, but those I've kind of quantified as the big four because those have each shaped and broke me in different ways. And then I had emergency surgery when I was 24, 25, right around there. It's been that many years here, 25, yeah. What I ended up having was emergency abdominal surgery where I had an appendectomy, so appendix removal, gallbladder removal, and an intestinal blockage. From that surgery, I had a code blue, so I actually coded. And I can tell you, there is no feeling in the world like life leaving your body. It gives me nightmares till this day.
Wow.
And so you said code white. So code white for us is what's called rapid response. So everyone has a little bit different. So basically I was in need of a rapid response because the next step is code blue.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah. So I've had multiple code whites. I had COVID, and I mean COVID in March, April of 2020. So before we even knew really what it was, I spent 67 days in the hospital. And when I got out of the hospital, I got out in June. It wasn't until October that I was able to get off the couch 7 days in a row.
That's very scary.
So COVID broke me. COVID broke me in so many different ways. So I've had each of these occurrences, and that doesn't include my comorbidity list, which consists of CF, CFRD, CF diabetes. I have polycystic kidney disease. I have liver disease, chronic GI disorder. I have some mental health struggles as well. So, and then we take on the cracked cartilages in my knee, torn groin muscles. You keep adding that psoriasis and eczema. So you can literally pick whatever organ you want to, and boom, there's something wrong with it here. Each one of those things just give me really an opportunity to showcase resilience and also to be vulnerable about my struggles.
And it is a beautiful thing you're able to do. I don't think anyone would guess any of that in speaking with you. And I think that's a reminder. And one thing I try to remember and try to also tell people, you just don't know what's going on with somebody, right? So always choose kindness, even if someone is initially grouchy or rude to you, right? Like smile back at them and really try to perpetuate kindness and understanding, because no one would ever guess this about you, right?
Right. And I pride myself on that. I pride myself on always being Nick and never looking sickly. I never want somebody to look at me as sickly. I know during times of my struggles, I sometimes go, I wish everyone can walk in my shoes while no one has to walk in my shoes. Because there's also that struggle. People treat people who look sick differently.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a fact. when you see you look sickly, you're underweight, or you have oxygen always on, people will treat those people differently. I have parked in a handicap spot and I've had a woman run up on me, like accost me for parking in the spot.
Oh my gosh, yikes.
I've had a police officer pull me over because I parked in the spot and I told him I had a slew of medical things and he unholstered his gun on me.
Terrifying.
I've had these things happen all because I don't look sick. So it doesn't look like I belong. And even in the hospital, I've had people who aren't pulmonologists, hospitalists, different doctors come in and go, why are you still in the hospital? Nurses, why are you here? Because I'm walking around. I'm sorry, I don't fit your mold of what sick looks like. And I refuse to lay in bed and wallow as if I am not going to get better. So that's you can feel my vigor and a little bit of passion because I don't want to have to fight my disease and fight people about my disease.
Right. I think it's so important what you're saying because it is true in that the parking in the handicap spot where you should not be challenged by anyone is a great example. I mean, I don't know what people are thinking, why they think they have to, quote, police that. But I mean, who would want everything that you have to deal with? So I'm glad you're out there educating everyone about it.
I love education. I love being able to teach. I love knowledge. One of my favorite quotes is, a candle doesn't lose anything lighting another candle.
Ooh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, shout out to my friend and business partner, Archie Smith, for that one.
I think you should make T-shirts. I would buy one.
I know.
I love that. Oh my gosh.
I got to get it in my clothing line. I actually have a clothing line, so I might have to add that one on the cutting room floor. I might have to pick that one up.
Yeah, and we have all your information in show notes too, so.
Excellent. So I've been able to really provide information and provide knowledge. And one of the interesting things is, I'm going to tell you a quick story because a lot of people don't know this. So I'm a public speaker, so I travel the country doing different talks. And, people often ask me how I got into public speaking. And it's important because my public speaking, I just feel like sharing knowledge. So when Shelly, my sister, passed, she would always tell me, before she passed, Shelly would always tell me, Nick, tell your story. You could really help somebody. Nick, tell your story. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to do that. Growing up, she would always say, Nick, tell your story. You could help someone. I think you could be impactful. I said, yeah, I'll let somebody else do that. And so when she passed away, I was broken in so many pieces. Like it left a void in me that I didn't know could exist. And the only way for me to heal was to start to tell our story. And as I did that, it helped me heal. And so it's funny because Shelly would always tell me, Nick, tell your story. Nick, tell your story. You could really help someone. I just never knew I'd be the one that was helping. And that is really what fuels me inside of that, because I was able to find solace and then a passion I never knew. I always tell people, if Michelle thought a painting would help other people, I might be Picasso right now. So
don't you also feel, because I do, when you're helping other people, you're helping and healing yourself. I find this podcast that I do and talking to you and other people, I feel so much better. I can completely relate to you as a parent of 2 daughters with cystic fibrosis. And then when I hear your story, it's very therapeutic for me. I find my foundation, and I always say this, is my therapy. And you must feel that too.
Absolutely. It feels great. It feels cathartic. It feels liberating, uplifting when I'm able to be in front of crowds. I'm able to educate, whether it be 1, 100, or 1,000. When I'm able to provide that light, when I'm able to provide these things internally, allows me. So I always believe in the 3 Ps is a method I believe in. Passion, purpose, and productivity. You find passion, utilize purpose, and increases productivity. So I found my passion. So I'm able to display that purpose. And that purpose allows me to want to increase productivity or increase how I do it. It gives me that drive to continue to do it. And that is what I see. That purpose is what allows me to feel better. It allows me to think. I tell people when they ask me about medication compliance or talking to other patients, I always give the example is nobody has a car and goes to the gas station for the sole purpose of driving it to another gas station. And how does that look when it comes to CF? Nobody wants to take medicine for the sole purpose of getting to the point to take more medication.
Mm-hmm.
We want to take medication or use that car, fill up with gas so we can then go to the movies, go to outings, and then have to get more gas. You want your patients to realize they're taking their medication so they can go hang out with friends, go on trips, and then take more medication so they continue to do those things. They're not taking medication just to get to the point of taking more medication, because who wants to do that? What kind of lifestyle is that?
That's a great explanation. And I agree. I think that being a news reporter was definitely my passion, but my purpose was CF. I was always looking for my purpose. Like, this is great. I love this job, but like, I haven't found my purpose. And then when Molly was born and she was diagnosed with CF, and then later Emily, it all made sense to me. Radio gave me a voice. Like, this is my purpose. And it's been a beautiful ride ever since, even though, of course, it would be great if cystic fibrosis didn't exist.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you found passion, and like you said, radio gave you voice, but that initial passion is what led you to your purpose.
Absolutely.
And so that's where it looks at, finding passion will lead you to your purpose. It may not lead you in the time frame in which a person might think, but it will guide you there. And then look, now you're here making a huge difference, being able to help people and help yourself, bring awareness and talk to people like me who are really excited and love what you're doing, and also just want to be a part of that excitement, want to be a part of that success, want to be a part of purpose. I believe when people find passion, display purpose, it inherently makes other people want to be a part of that purpose.
I agree. It's my joy, my jam, for sure. I also wanted to ask you, so we diagnosed Molly ourselves without the help of a pediatrician because she thought I was a first-time mom and didn't know what I was talking about, etc. And we're great friends with that pediatrician 28 years later. But I wondered how you were diagnosed, how your parents figured it out, and because I have talked to so many people of color who weren't diagnosed until their late 20s or later, some in their 50s, how you were diagnosed at 3 months old, because it is rare for African Americans, I have found, to be diagnosed at such a young age. So tell us your story on that.
So it's funny, you started talking about how you were able to do it. So that mother's intuition is real. It was actually my mom who diagnosed me with CF, because for that fact, 36 years ago, they didn't believe African Americans can have this disease. And so no one would test me. And sadly, some of that rhetoric still exists.
It does. It's maddening.
So my mom is actually the one who did the research, and she learned the symptoms and she diagnosed me.
Shout out to your mom.
Shout out to Mom Dukes.
Absolutely. Hell yes. And what is her first name?
Sheila.
All right, Sheila. Love you. Haven't met you, but I love you already. We're going to have to talk.
She diagnosed me with CF, and it got to the point where as I continued to get sicker, she actually went to hospital administration and said, if you do not test my son for this disease, I will go to every news outlet and let them know that your prejudice killed my son.
Oh, I love her.
And so I got officially, air quotes, diagnosed at 3 months, but it was my mother who diagnosed me. And it was wild. And I used that because, although I was too young to realize it at that time, her ferocity and her tenaciousness really kind of shaped a lot of me growing up. Like, my mom was the fiery, she's the firecracker. She's that one, in your face. And then my dad is really he's where I get my calm from.
Mm-hmm.
My dad is the real chill one. He kind of hangs in the back, doesn't say a lot, but when he speaks, it's impactful. So that's where they kind of balance each other out. And that's where I get a lot of my calm comes from my dad, and a lot of my, all right, it's go time, That comes from my mom.
Oh, I love her. That is wonderful and so unique because, like I said, I've talked to so many people who are like, no, it's really a white disease, continue on. And then as I continue to tell people, even the newborn screening misses so many people of color because mainly white mutations are being tested for in newborn screening, and mutations that would diagnose people of color aren't in that newborn screening. And every state tests for a different amount. Some states only test for 4 of the 2,000 mutations and others test for more, but we have a lot of work to do still. What does your future look like? You're doing so much. As you said, you're speaking and your poetry and your videos and all of that. What are you looking forward to and dreaming about in your future?
So there's a couple things. First, I'm going to shout out Susie Magoo is a children's book I co-authored and co-illustrated with one of my great friends, Maria. She's actually was my CF nurse. So Susie Magoo is a girl who goes through life and learns different therapies and different things about life as she has CF. And the first book was on the huff cough, or we call it the cup cough. The second book just came out the first week of September, and it's on the respiratory meds. Book 3 is in production, and I'll hold off on what that's going to be on, but book 3 is currently in production, and then book 4 and book 5. So that's a 5-part series. So I'm looking forward to Susie Magoo. My cookbook will be out before the end of the year is the plan.
That is exciting. And what's the focus of it? CF related, not CF related?
High calorie, actually.
Ooh.
So it is a high calorie cookbook.
Wonderful.
As a dietitian, everything is low calorie, which makes sense. There is still an obesity issue, but most people forget or don't know there's an entire population out there who needs high calorie. Athletes is one of them, CF, failure to thrive, cancer pre and post chemo, as well as snapshot weight management. Example, I use that in maybe an actor for a movie role. So all these people need high calorie, and there's just not a lot of options out there.
Right.
So I wanted to fill that void.
And not a problem I've ever had as far as gaining weight. I'm really good at that. But I know there are people, like even my hairdresser, he doesn't have any disease, but has a lot of trouble gaining weight. So it's going to be a great gift I can give to him when your book comes out.
I'm really excited. So be on the lookout. That one's called No Need for Seconds.
I love that title.
That's on the horizon. And really just the last one is my speaking engagements. I've done so much work in the healthcare space and the CF space that I'm currently also in the transition of looking to speak to more corporations at the human resource level, speaking to clinicians, incoming and current, speaking to hospital administration, speaking to these places to understand that mentality is not singular to CF. My mentality is about how anyone going through anything can improve, how anybody can use passion, purpose, and productivity to increase whatever workplace culture there is, how talking about diversity, equity, inclusion can improve the workplace and workplace culture. So really just expanding that network of people I'm talking to, as I have a story to share, and I believe, maybe some biasly, that I have an ability to really help and touch people. So I just want to continue to touch as many people as possible and influence and help as many people as possible.
And what do you feel people want to hear from you the most? Is there a question that they consistently ask you, or is there an issue that you feel like people are drawn to asking you?
Whew. There's a bevy of questions that I get pretty constant. Compliance is always one of them, is a huge question I get. And, I use the example about the gas station, but I think just in a broad term, not just health related. One of the biggest questions I believe I get is about communication, how to bridge that gap between communications and those deficits. And I like to give an example when we talk about this. I call it the healthy person's mind state. Say you're talking to a person, and we'll take medicine. when you're having a great day, right? It's a 8 out of 10, feeling fantastic. If that day goes to a 10 out of 10, you don't really notice the difference. You might notice a couple moments, but you don't really notice the difference. Now, on the counter side, say a person's days start at a 4 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Now, telling them, hey, you need to take your medication so you can feel better. Taking their medication only takes them to a 5 out of 10. They don't really feel the difference. Not taking their medication only takes them to a 2.5 out of 10. So we went from a 4 to 2.5. So telling someone to take their medicine is not going to be the thing that can guide them, because if they take it, they don't get much better. And then when they don't take it, they don't get much worse. Whereas if a person who was at 8 out of 10 didn't take the medication, they would go down to a 4 and they would immediately feel that.
Mm-hmm.
And right there is the healthy person's mindset, because people often view where they are and they want to apply that to other people's situations. And that right there inherently will create a gap, because their situation is not yours. So you talking to them from your vantage point without understanding the differences is what is always going to create a deficit and a gap between anything. This whether be employee relationship, peer-to-peer, subordinate, whatever that might be. So what we have to do as individuals is take a step back and say, I recognize my bias. I recognize where I am, but how do I then understand where the person I am talking to is at, so I can find resolution based on their situation?
That's great advice. Great points. As we wrap up this podcast, is there anything I didn't ask you that you wanted to mention?
So one of the things I always want to tell people is so much of life is about mentality. How you look at things, how you allow your perspective to be shifted, and how you allow your mentality to be shaped. If you are open and willing to opportunities for growth, then evolution is the thing that will follow. And I believe for so many of us, we get stuck inside of our own bubble, and we're not willing to look outside of that to have opportunities to grow and evolve. Because nothing great was ever accomplished in your comfort zone. And I'm going to repeat that just so you think. Nothing great was ever accomplished in your comfort zone. Find a way to be uncomfortable, to allow yourself to grow, to allow yourself to evolve. And in that evolution, you'll see the difference that you can make.
That is the truth, and such a beautiful way to end this podcast. I thank you for all the wisdom and all the insight, everything that you shared. I know you're uplifting so many people who are hearing this, so I am glad that we got together to do this podcast, because you're an inspiration, and we're going to see so much more of you because you have so much more coming in the months ahead. So thank you so much for being part of this Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It was truly an honor. It was a pleasure being on the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast. So I just want to take a time and thank you for all the work you're doing with your podcast, with your foundation, and really making a difference in the CF community.
And I appreciate that. Thanks. The original music in this podcast is performed by Kevin Allen, who happens to have cystic fibrosis.
We all got our worries and fears. I know what's got you frustrated, but loving you is so alright.
This has been the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast. For more information and to learn more about the Bonnell Foundation, visit our website at thebonnellfoundation.org. That's the BONNELL Foundation.org. This podcast was sponsored by Viatris, Genentech, and Vertex. It was produced by Jag and Detroit Podcasts. Follow our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now.